The village of Kosoko fell silent as the young man stumbled out of the sacred grove, his eyes wild with terror. His once pristine white agbada was now stained with red clay and torn from thorny branches. As he collapsed in the village square, the only words he could mutter were, "She was never real. She was never real." In the peaceful village of Echo, nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, Tunde was known as the most skilled hunter among the young men. His father, the village's chief hunter, had trained him in all the ancient ways: how to track animals through the thickest bush, how to read the messages of the wind, and most importantly, how to respect the spirits of the land. But there was one lesson Tunde had yet to learn. Sometimes the most dangerous prey is the one that hunts you first. The harvest season had been good to Echo. The yam barns were full, and the palm wine flowed freely at every gathering. As tradition demanded, the village prepared for the annual harvest festival, where young men and women from neighboring villages would come together to celebrate and perhaps find their life partners. Tunde had little interest in marriage. His passion lay in the hunt, in the quiet moments before dawn, when he could slip into the forest like a shadow. But all that changed the moment Adanna arrived. She came with a delegation from a distant village across the great river. Unlike the other visitors who arrived in groups, Adanna walked alone. Her wrapper was the color of sunset, and her movements had a grace that made even the eldest women pause and watch. But it was her eyes that caught Tunde's attention. They held a depth that seemed to reflect the ancient wisdom of the forest itself. "Who is she?" Tunde asked Segun, his childhood friend and the village drummer. "They say she's the daughter of a powerful priest from the river village," Segun replied, his fingers absently tapping out a rhythm on his talking drum. "But something about her feels different." That evening, as the drums pulsed and young people danced around the bonfire, Tunde couldn't take his eyes off Adanna. She danced like no one he had ever seen, her movements somehow both fluid and sharp, like a flame dancing in the wind. When their eyes met across the fire, he felt a jolt that had nothing to do with the palm wine he'd been drinking. Later, as the celebration wound down, Adanna approached him. "I've heard you're a hunter," she said, her voice carrying a musical lilt that made his heart race. "Perhaps you could show me the forests around your village." Warning bells should have rung in Tunde's mind. No proper young woman would make such a request, especially not to a man she had just met. But there was something in her smile that pushed all caution aside. The next morning, before the sun had fully risen, they met at the edge of the village. Tunde led her through his favorite hunting trails, showing her the hidden streams and ancient trees that had been his companions since childhood. Adanna listened intently, asking questions that revealed a deep knowledge of forest lore. "How do you know so much about the bush?" he asked, impressed by her understanding. "My father taught me well," she replied with that mysterious smile. "There are many kinds of hunting, Tunde." Days passed, and Tunde found himself spending every free moment with Adanna. The other visitors returned to their villages, but she remained, claiming she had permission to stay longer. The village elders whispered among themselves, but her charm and respectful manner soon won them over. Even Tunde's father, known for his strict adherence to tradition, seemed enchanted by Adanna. "She has old eyes," he said one evening, "like someone who has lived many lives." But not everyone was captivated. Segun watched the growing romance with increasing concern. "Something isn't right," he told Tunde one evening. "Have you noticed that no one from her village has come to check on her? And why does she always disappear just before sunset?" Tunde dismissed his friend's concerns. Love had blinded him to the signs that would have been clear to any hunter tracking dangerous prey. He didn't notice how the animals fell silent when Adanna passed through the forest, or how his hunting charms seemed to lose their power when she was near. One moonless night, Adanna led Tunde deeper into the forest than they had ever gone before. They came to a clearing he had never seen, though he thought he knew every inch of these woods. Ancient trees formed a perfect circle, their branches weaving together to create a natural dome. "This is my special place," Adanna said, her eyes gleaming in the darkness. "I want to share it with you." She pulled him into a dance, humming a melody that seemed to make the very air vibrate. As they moved together, Tunde felt himself growing dizzy. The trees appeared to be moving, their branches reaching down like grasping hands. "What's happening?" he gasped, trying to pull away. Adanna's grip was impossibly strong. "You're mine now," she whispered, her voice no longer sweet, but ancient and terrible, just like all the others. In that moment, her true form was revealed. Her beautiful face melted away, showing something that belonged in the darkest nightmares. Her eyes glowed with an unnatural fire, and her teeth had become sharp like those of a forest cat. Terror gave Tunde strength he didn't know he possessed. He broke free of her grasp and ran, crashing through the undergrowth with no thought of direction. Behind him, he could hear her laugh, a sound like dried bones rattling in the wind. He ran until his legs gave out, collapsing at the edge of the sacred grove near Kosoko village. As consciousness faded, he saw faces gathering around him, heard voices raised in alarm. "She was never real," he managed to say before darkness took him. The story should have ended there. Many men would have been broken by such an experience, their spirits crushed by the revelation of such darkness. But Tunde's tale was just beginning. The people of Kosoko took him in, and under the care of their chief priest, Tunde slowly regained his strength. The priest, Baba Kola, was known throughout the region for his power to combat dark forces. He listened to Tunde's story with grave attention. "You encountered a Mmuo Mmiri, a water spirit," Baba Kola explained. "They take beautiful forms to lure young men to their doom. You are fortunate to have escaped." "But why me?" Tunde asked, his voice hoarse from screaming in his sleep. "Perhaps because you were pure of heart, despite your pride," the priest replied. "Or perhaps you were chosen for a greater purpose." As Tunde recovered, he learned that he was not the first young man to fall prey to the water spirit's charms. Over the years, many had disappeared in the forests, their families left to wonder about their fate. Some had returned like him, their minds shattered by what they had experienced. Others were never seen again. Instead of breaking him, this knowledge awakened something new in Tunde. The skills that had made him a great hunter could now serve a different purpose. Under Baba Kola's guidance, he began to learn the ancient ways of combating dark forces. "The same attention you once used to track animals," the old priest taught him, "can help you sense the presence of evil. The patience you learned waiting for prey will serve you well in this new hunt." Months passed as Tunde absorbed everything the priest could teach him. He learned to recognize the signs of spirit activity, to craft protective charms, and most importantly, to strengthen his own spirit against darkness. Word spread about the young hunter who had escaped the water spirit's clutch. People began coming to Kosoko seeking help with their own encounters with dark forces. Each story helped Tunde build a clearer picture of what he was facing. But he knew he would never be at peace until he confronted Adanna, or whatever she really was, one final time. The water spirit had to be stopped before she claimed more victims. When Tunde announced his intention to return to the forest, Baba Kola didn't try to stop him. Instead, the old priest spent days preparing special charms and teaching Tunde the ancient words of power that could bind a spirit. The night of the new moon, when spirits were said to be at their strongest, Tunde entered the forest. He carried no weapons except the charms Baba Kola had prepared and his own unwavering determination. This time, he was the hunter, not the hunted. He found the clearing exactly as he remembered it. Standing in its center was Adanna, beautiful and terrible as ever. She smiled when she saw him, showing teeth that were a little too sharp to be human. "Have you come back to me, my love?" she asked, her voice sweet as honey. "I've missed our dances." "No more deception," Tunde replied, his voice firm. "Show yourself as you truly are." The air grew thick with tension as Adanna's form began to shift and change. What stood before him now was a creature of nightmare, neither fully human nor fully spirit. But Tunde didn't flinch. He had faced his fears in the long months of preparation, and they no longer held power over him. What followed was a battle unlike any other, not of physical strength, but of will and spirit. Adanna tried every trick she knew, taking the forms of lost loved ones, promising power and riches, threatening with visions of terror. But Tunde stood firm, protected by his faith and the wisdom Baba Kola had shared. As the night wore on, Tunde began to recite the ancient words of binding. Each phrase seemed to cause the spirit physical pain. The trees around them groaned and swayed, though there was no wind. Finally, as the first light of dawn began to creep through the trees, Adanna fell to her knees. Her form flickered between human and spirit as she looked up at Tunde with eyes that held centuries of loneliness. "Why can't you just love me?" she asked, her voice now ancient and tired. "All I wanted was to be loved." For the first time, Tunde felt pity for the creature. "Love cannot be taken," he said gently. "It can only be given freely." With the final words of the binding, Adanna's form dissolved into mist that sank into the earth. The clearing fell silent, but it was a peaceful silence, like the forest after a storm has passed. Tunde returned to Kosovo not as a broken man, but as someone who had found his true calling. Under Baba Kola's continued guidance, he became known as a protector of people troubled by dark forces. His understanding of both the physical and spiritual worlds made him uniquely suited to this role. Years later, when children gathered around the evening fires, they would tell stories of the hunter who faced the water spirit and lived. But the real lesson of Tunde's tale wasn't about defeating darkness. It was about finding light within oneself, even in the darkest of places. In time, he even found true love with Ada, Baba Kola's granddaughter, who shared his commitment to helping others. Their partnership proved that real love, freely given and rooted in mutual respect, was stronger than any spirit's enchantment. The forest where he once hunted became his place of healing, where he helped others face their own darkness. And sometimes, on quiet nights when the moon was new, he would visit the clearing where it all began, not out of fear or regret, but to remember that every ending can also be a beginning. For in the end, the greatest magic of all was not in charms or ancient words, but in the power of the human spirit to face darkness and emerge stronger. This was the truth Tunde had learned, and the legacy he passed on to all who sought his help. Share your thoughts about this story in the comments section, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this channel for more exciting stories from the heart of Africa.